Good morning to you, and thank you so much for coming on the programme. I believe that your conviction, your prosecution and conviction, followed you raising the alarm that there was something wrong with the accounts in your sub-post office. Is that right?
Yes, that was back in 2006, which I was prosecuted for and then sent to jail in 2007.
And is it right that you were advised by your own solicitor to plead guilty to a lesser charge to avoid facing conviction for a greater charge? In other words, that you were advised to say that you had committed a crime that you had not committed?
Yeah, what he advised me to do was the post office prosecution team had offered a plea and said if she takes a guilty plea for the false accounting, we'll drop the theft. But they'd already cleared me of theft anyway. I mean, they had access to all my financial details. So there wasn't anything else to prove. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. And I ended up taking the guilty plea because he said if I pleaded guilty to it, then I wouldn't get a custodial sentence, but I got a custodial sentence anyway.
Paul Embry is going to ask you a question.
Janet, I was just interested, really, what impact did this have in terms of your own reputation within your community? Because obviously postmasters, sub-postmistresses are often pillars of their communities, and when they're hauled off to jail in this way, it clearly affects their standing in a very serious way. What did it mean for you in terms of your reputation and your relationship with your community?
Hull's quite a small town. And obviously the papers didn't actually print a very good story about me. People shunned me. Do you know what? I spent 14 years being actually embarrassed to say my full name just in case people recognised who I was. That was just, and I mean, when I went to jail, it was my kids that was left behind who had to deal with what was being said about me in the tabloids and things.
Janet, it doesn't seem to me that anybody has been held to account for what has happened. Is that something that bothers you? Do you feel embittered about that?
Yeah, I do. People think this is all about getting compensation. And for me, do you know what? It's not. It's about justice. I mean, I was prosecuted in 2006, sent to jail 2007. And I mean, there's been numerous victims that have been sent to jail. And there's obviously there's 736 convictions that they've taken, which works out between the actual time of the installation of the Horizon system up to 2014, works out one per week, per year, for every year. So, and for somebody to never be held to account, I don't just want this inquiry to just take all the information and then nothing happen at the end of it. This isn't just about one person. This is about a number of people who've overviewed what's been going on.
Janet, you feel then that you could have expected the management of the post office to spot that something untoward was happening, to show some curiosity about why so many hundreds of postmasters, sub-postmasters and mistresses were being prosecuted?
When you go from, I mean, because it was manual up to 2000, and balancing was extremely easy because you had like two ledgers. You had your daily ledger and then you had your weekly ledger. So everything that you did daily was transferred into your weekly. So, and things was really easy to track. But then obviously with the Horizon system, it wasn't. You just basically went by what them figures said.
Janet Skinner, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Thank you.
So, Arlene, I wonder, how do you react to this? I mean, it does strike me that it is quite extraordinary that this situation could go on for many years within an organisation without the management simply saying it is implausible. It is implausible that this number of people can suddenly have become rogue or criminal. How can there have been such a lack of curiosity, do you think, within the organisation about what was going on in the post office?
Well, I think that's actually the nub of the problem here, Michael, because here you had over 700 people suddenly becoming criminals overnight, people who were pillars of society, people who the community would have went to, and all of a sudden these people were committing frauds according to the system. And as I understand it, the problem arose when if you were putting through a transaction on the Horizon system and the internet failed, and let's face it, between 2000 and 2014, the internet wasn't exactly robust at that time, particularly for rural post offices. So if the internet went down in the middle of a transaction, then what actually happened is when you went back to do the transaction, when the internet came back up again, it didn't cancel the first transaction and double accounted the second transaction. So, of course, there was then a problem. But my issue is in terms of Fujitsu, which is the company that designed this Horizon platform for post offices, if they knew there was a problem during those 14 years, then those people who give evidence in cases such as the one that we've heard of were actually committing perjury, because they have given evidence that these people have committed fraud, committed theft, when in actual fact, the problem was the platform, the problem was the technology. And I just find it incredible, as you say, that it went on for 14 years, that nobody thought that how is it that all of these people have suddenly become fraudsters when they were previously such well-respected people. And it is a scandal. And I really hope the public inquiry gets to the bottom of it and that people, importantly, are held accountable for it as well.
Eileen, did you see it at a constituency level? Did you see people in Northern Ireland either writing to you or to other representatives, political representatives, saying what had happened? Did it raise alarm bells with you? And if so, when?
No, I didn't have anyone come to me directly, but I did notice in the House of Lords when the debate on the public inquiry came up that one of our Lords members, Baroness Ritchie, raised the issue in relation to Northern Ireland victims. So there are victims here in Northern Ireland. There's victims right across the United Kingdom in relation to this whole issue, and it is a scandal, and it absolutely needs to be dealt with.
Paul, you feel pretty indignant about this, I think, and how could one feel anything else?
I just think it's the most appalling miscarriage of justice. 700 decent people, upstanding, pillars of their community, as Arlene said. And we all know that postmasters, postmistresses are very well respected in their local communities. And to have this on their reputation, to have been accused and convicted of stealing money when they were innocent, and to see their reputations dragged through the mud, it's incredible, as has been said, that nobody thought, well, hold on a second, all of these people being convicted, is there not something wrong with the software? And I was struck by the fact that, reading up on the affair, that Frank Field, the former Labour MP, who, as you know, was Work and Pensions Minister at the turn of the century, raised concerns over the Horizon software at the time. So it's not like this was...
At which time?
Around 2000.
Around 2000?
Around 2000. So
he was raising concerns around 2000?
So, and it's there, it's on the record. So we're talking about 20 years ago that some people were flagging up the fact that there were glitches and problems with this software. And, Janet said it wasn't about compensation, and I understand that entirely. But even so, I think that given what these people have been through, they're entitled to the maximum compensation. And sadly, people have recognised the fact that some of them are in advancing years now and may not live to see justice. And that would be incredibly sad. But somebody somewhere surely has got to be held to account for what is unquestionably one of the biggest miscarriages of justice, I think, in our history.
Well, one of the things I think that will irritate people very much is that it appears to be, as usual, one of these establishment cover-ups. How can it be that this has gone on for 20 years or 10 years, depending on how you define the problem, and yet no one has been held to account? So I think the chief executive of the Post Office was Paula Venables. That was between about 2012 and 2019, from memory. Not only has she not been held to account for this, she went on to a senior position in the health service. She had a position at the Cabinet Office. She was given a CBE. Obviously, she was well paid. She was a vicar in the Church of England. She was due to go before a select committee I think, in late March of 2020. And, of course, we all know what happened to committee hearings in late March of 2020. It was postponed and I think has not been re-held. So it really is an extraordinary case of the person at the top not being held accountable and indeed being multiply rewarded, I think, for non-performance. And this is going to make people very indignant. And Arlene raises, I think, what is a separate question, which is what went on at Fujitsu. I mean, one could understand a glitch in programming. Everyone can make a mistake. But the issue we're now looking at really is when this glitch in the programming was understood, and whether people then decided that there needed to be some sort of cover-up, and whether then false information was supplied as part of the convictions. So maybe almost a final question to the two of you, to Arlene and to Paul. Do we think that the public inquiry will give satisfaction? Will the people responsible for this be held accountable? Arlene, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I was reflecting on how we were talking about the defensiveness of institutions last week when we talked about the Metropolitan Police. And here we have another big institution, the Post Office, which of course is 100% owned by the government, being defensive about something that has impacted upon individual lives. And we should remember that one of those involved actually took his own life. So, I mean, this has had a huge impact on these individuals, and we shouldn't minimise the fact that the stigma that these people felt. And you heard Janet saying that she wouldn't use her full name in case people recognised her. I mean, that is an incredibly huge issue for an individual person to have to deal with. But I do hope the public inquiry gets to the truth. The public inquiry has got statutory powers, so they can ask for documents and data. And I hope that they use those powers to get to the bottom of all of this and to bring some semblance of justice. They can never be fully compensated for what they've gone through, but they should at least, hopefully, get some semblance of justice and people are held to account for what has happened.
Oh, Paul, it all takes so long, doesn't it? Do you have faith in the public inquiry?
Not particularly. I don't have faith in public inquiries generally. We live in a culture now, sadly, where nobody falls on their sword. Nobody takes the drop when they're head of an institution that has failed badly, as has happened here. But I hope the public inquiry at least asks the right questions, you know, and holds Fujitsu to account for the glitches, and did they know about them, and when did they know about them? When did the post office managers know that this was a serious problem? Why didn't they flag up the fact that so many of their postmasters and postmistresses were being convicted? Was that not a warning light to them? So I hope it asks the right questions at least. As to whether it will deliver justice, we can only wait and see.
I suspect that the indignation expressed by the three of us on this programme and the great sympathy that we feel for Janet Skinner, who spoke to us earlier, will be shared throughout the country. So I think there's a tremendous burden of responsibility that falls upon this public inquiry.